Do you want to talk about the heroine's journey at all, or
You better, or I'm going to lose my mind.
I know exactly. Yeah, Laura is always the checks and balance of information.
Well, I will tell you
You
that
can't just like drop a potato in the middle of the room and then nobody knows. Like, what the?
Hi there and welcome. I'm PJ Manney, your host for Love Letters to the Future with my co-host
Laura Faye Tenenbaum. Hi, everybody.
And we're here today with Nisi Shawl, one of the people who inspired this podcast. The new mythos is very much about taking the old stories and ways of telling them that no longer serve us and embracing new ways of telling stories that reflect both reality and all of us.
A better reality.
A better reality. And Nisi has been doing this for many years. When I had my infamous epiphany in the middle of a panel on NorwestCon, Nisi was sitting right next to me. We were
Tell
on the same
everybody
panel.
what NorwestCon is.
NorwestCon is a science fiction and fantasy convention that takes place in Seattle every year. And they had a marvelous panel called Science Fiction in the Age of President Trump.
Oh, no.
And we were both on that panel when I had my out-of-body experience, and poor Nisi probably thought I was having like a stroke or something. But that was the moment that I realized what was happening in our culture, and Nisi was a really big part of that. Nisi co-founded Writing the Other with Kay Tempest Bradford, and it's an extraordinary school designed for writers of all kinds, but especially speculative fiction writers, to understand the cultural assumptions we all live with that very often are myths, that aren't true, aren't real, aren't serving us, or hurting others, and expanding our minds to understand what's possible. So Nisi, welcome. We are so excited to have you. Seriously, you have no idea.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I really want to talk to you about Writing the Other. Since so much of the show is about creating new ways of seeing and tools that we can use to help others tell these kinds of stories, what inspired you to create Writing the Other?
Okay, so I was at a science fiction workshop, writing workshop, with a bunch of colleagues that would become, basically my cohort, my running mates. And there were a bunch of fires that summer. There were fires, I don't know, was somebody setting them? I'm not sure. But we were out during one of the many fire drills, and one of my classmates, Amy Wolf, was saying that she would never write fiction that was based on someone else's experience, as in a different culture, a different race, a different ability, a different gender. She just wasn't going to go there because she knew she would get it wrong. And I just thought, well, that's an easy way out.
Like a cop-out, you mean?
Well, or, just stay back from like trying to accomplish anything. So that inspired me to say, actually you can do that kind of stuff. You have to learn how to do it. You have to be good at it. But nobody is going to tell me that you can't do that.
Interesting. So this Writing the Other is a website and a place where there's essays and articles and also classes.
Yes, and it started out actually first as classes in person that I taught with Cindy Ward, who was also present in that moment. And Cindy has a way of just saying things without any to-do. She just states things right out, like, nope, you're wrong.
Our kind of lady.
So Cindy and I started teaching, and then we decided to put a book together, Writing the Other. And then other people we invited to teach with us, including my friend Victoria Garcia and Kay Tempest Bradford, who really brought us up to speed as far as being online. So that was the source of getting to be a website and doing online classes, which were able to reach many more people than the in-person ones.
And I certainly benefited from that, especially since I was taking them during COVID, which was a wonderful opportunity to have them.
So were you always super comfortable in writing people who had, in your fiction stories, different backgrounds, different experiences than you do? Or did you have to struggle and learn how to do that as well? Or did it seem to come more natural?
I was, of course, learning. I think okay, so I'm Black, and I have a bunch of other differences from what we would call the dominant paradigm, like the sort of the default setting for this time and this place. So I already have an advantage because I'm used to writing about people who are different than me, because that is kind of the main way that you write these days, right? You write stories that are the default setting. There's a difference there because there's all this power differential stuff, right? There's all the power dynamics. So if I am writing about someone who is not obese, as I am, for instance, or who does not have arthritis, or someone who is white, or someone who is heterosexual, I'm writing sort of up to their privilege. And that is a difference. Then if I'm writing about someone who is different from the dominant paradigm in the same way I am, that is another difference. And then if I'm writing about someone, say I'm writing when I'm like 35, which is an age group that is well represented in fiction, let us say, and I'm writing about someone who is 80, then I'm writing, I would say, down the grade of privilege. So there are a number of different attitudes, a number of different stances that you can have with this, but I would say that I had an advantage because I was at least cognizant of doing the one where I was writing up. So then I had to learn how to write down or across or whatever, but I already had some practice writing away, shall we say. Does that make sense?
Not only does it make sense, I think it's very interesting. Even the terms writing up and writing down. Sorry, PJ, if you had more questions, but I'm just dying to ask this one. It seems like, obviously, there's a benefit for the audience who would be reading the writing. But it seems like there'd be a huge advantage to the author themselves to be able to build these characters within themselves and to understand.
Well, sure, yeah. Anytime that you can broaden your scope of the characters that you're representing, you're going to be making everything more interesting for your readers and more interesting for yourself, okay?
And it's all the empathy creation that you get to do along the way, regardless
Yeah.
of where on the scale of away it is. There's...
I want to live in a world where there's not up and down. There's just across the way. Sounds so much better. I can't imagine, as a person of a certain privilege, using the term writing down for a race that's not as privileged as mine. I mean, even to say it sounds like so cringy and derogatory. I don't know.
It does sound a little hierarchical,
uncomfortable, yeah.
But think about it in terms of comedy as well. There's punching up and punching down.
Correct.
So
I'd always rather punch up. It's more funny. punching down is awful.
No, it is awful. Exactly.
It is.
Exactly.
But it's the same sort of thing where you have like this grade of privilege, and are you writing with your privilege? Are you writing with trying to reach someone else with a higher privilege, trying to fit into their mindset, or someone with less privilege? Think of it that way. It's not as like, saying you are worth less. It's saying you have less opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. So I took your original class, Should Authors Write Characters Different Than Themselves? And it's very intense. I highly recommend it for any writers out there, because it really does make you address, no matter where you are or how you perceive yourself or how you perceive others, it confronts your assumptions, which is what it's all about. You also have a class that I didn't take yet called Healing History's Wounds with Speculative Fiction, and your own fiction does that remarkably. So I'm not surprised you teach a class in it. It's such an interesting perspective that fiction, stories, can heal history's wounds. I'd love to hear more about that.
Well, there are many ways that stories can heal history's wounds. For one thing, they can get rid of false narratives. There was for just the longest time this idea that Jewish people did not fight against the Holocaust, that there were just like all these passive people. And speculative fiction could question that in ways that those without the resources to do real research could not do. So there's that, and then there's just like imagining an alternate history, a different way that things might have worked out with just the very slightest changes. And that is pretty much what I do with Everfair. I just have them do just a slight change so that the people of the Central African Congo Basin are not just becoming the victims of Leopold, but they're actually his customers. They buy the land from him. So then they have their own nation. So yeah, just a small change like that. That's another way that speculative fiction can heal that wound. There are others. I'm not going to tell about them all on,
Oh, that's true, because you want people to take the class.
Yeah, and you don't want to divulge all the secrets. But that is, I think it makes me curious to hear just the one or two examples. Makes me very curious.
Good.
The other kinds of classes that get taught there are, so much of what you talk about is character work. Probably the other class in character work that I found utterly profound and is 100% a part of the new mythos is Gail Carriger's work with the heroine's journey.
Oh, yes.
And once you understand the heroine's journey versus the hero's journey, you will never look at stories the same way again. Especially when you realize how many stories have been the heroine's journey in history and continue to be the heroine's journey. And yet, I think it's telling more of those stories that's so key to the new mythos. Do you want to talk about the heroine's journey at all? Or
you better, or I'm going to lose my mind.
I know, exactly. Yeah, Laura is always the checks and balance of information.
Well, I will tell you
You
that
can't just drop a potato in the middle of the room and then nobody knows. What's the potato?
Oh yeah, that, whatever. Yeah. No, I will tell you that I, many years ago, decided that I would write a book called The Heroine's Journey. I didn't.
Well, you're not dead yet. You're still here. There's time.
Right, but I think that Gail has done quite an adequate job of it.
Yes, absolutely.
I was just reading about heist stories and how much they are representative of the heroine's journey.
Exactly right.
Yeah, and they are. And so then I have to go back and look at Ocean's 8 again, and all the movies that are heist movies, the Thomas Crown Affair, and see them in this different light. I'm sure there are other ways of examining the heroine's journey, but just comparing what you've already seen to this sort of structure where the things are you can form communities. Isolation is not a strength. And then just one of my favorite things is that you can sometimes lose and you can sometimes compromise. And these are not bad steps along that journey. They are important ones that you need to take.
So for the audience, before Laura truly loses her mind, the heroine's
maybe
journey.
This is part of the heroine's journey, is that it comes out piece by piece by piece. So I can live with that.
So the hero's journey, which is when people think of that as Joseph Campbell's Power of Myth, is there is a hero, something changes, and he answers what's called the call to adventure. That's the end of the first act. The second act are a series of events where the problems and dangers escalate. He gets into what's called at the midpoint, the belly of the beast. It's the worst part of his journey of, how will he ever survive or accomplish his goal? And then in a series of both escalations to the climax, he conquers his goal, and then a very short denouement at the end where all's well that ends well.
Oh, another thing about the end, the hero cannot be part of the community that benefits from this journey.
Because he's the outsider hero by definition, yes.
And it returns the community to the status quo, which is the most dangerous part.
For the new mythos, because who wants the status quo? Ew.
Well, and it's not how any kind of reality actually works.
It's not realistic, of course.
Right.
There is no
So,
status quo.
The heroine's journey, which is based in Greek mythology, is often in the stories of women in ancient storytelling. They didn't choose a call to adventure to address a wrong. They didn't go out to slay a dragon. They were thrown out, forced out, abandoned, forced to leave their situation, gather companions to figure out now how do we now solve this new problem that their being cast out has created. And through a variety of group dynamic choices, decision-making, obstacles, and overcoming, by the end, it can end either you don't get the dragon slayed, or you do get the dragon slayed, but you were doing it all together, and the end is different than the status quo of the beginning. And you've created a new community and a new sense of reality by the end, where it wasn't reflected in the beginning. And there are so many stories that have always reflected this. The Wizard of Oz is actually a great example that most of the audience would know.
And then Nisi's books, right? Nisi, your books are most of them along these lines.
Because it's what I like. I'm writing
seems more real and true, huh?
Well, it's what I feel. So it shows up there. I feel the need to be in community with other people. I feel the need to ask for help. I think that it's important to ask for help, not to just decide, well, I can manage this on my own. No?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, in my opinion, this whole idea of rugged individualism is probably, if I had to pick one myth that I want to throw out and replace, it's that one. I actually call it toxic individualism because I think it is so misguided and toxic. Like you were saying, this whole idea that we could do it on our own, that asking for help is bad, and like it sounds like you're celebrating asking for help and desiring it, wanting it, rolling around in it.
It's part of being an adult, is asking for help. Hello?
Exactly. And it relieves both the pressure, but also in the diversity of the group, you have better choices. You make better choices. You know, that's not just in storytelling, that's in reality. Every single study ever proves that getting a diverse group of opinions and thoughts on moving forward gets you a better outcome. So if you're doing it in real life, why not tell stories about it?
But, for a long time, I didn't realize that's what I was doing. And I think that's one of the great things about reading that book is finding from Gail this model of what you've been doing already, what you've been looking for if you're a reader, what you've been doing in creatively if you're like a filmmaker or a writer or performer of some sort. You're going for that kind of story. Now, I think there are other models. I think there really are. And I think that there are many that have been lost or buried or misunderstood.
So you're saying that audiences love it, even though the writers, maybe struggle with it. The audiences are gobbling it up and not even noticing anything, any problem or any challenge at all.
Right. It's sometimes I think storytellers get stuck in their own cultural assumptions.
Okay, so that brings me to this question that I have. So the class is called "Should Authors Write Characters Different from Themselves?" And my question: how can they not? Is it possible to not, like, every single character is you? That sounds kooky to me.
Right, yeah. No, people will go with differences, but I find that they shy away from what I would call demographically significant differences, because there are all these differences, as you point out, Laura. But there are differences that receive heightened attention, such as sexuality, such as physical ability. Those
so you're saying like a white woman could write of upper class could write a white man of upper class, and that would be fine or something, or easy, or because I think any man trying to write a woman would. Some people don't do it very well, and the character seems flat. And then you see others who are like, "Wow, how did they know?" For example.
Yeah.
But then there's you're talking about sexual orientation. I think probably writing, but the classes, wealthy and less wealthy, or wealthy and struggling financially, would be a really hard one to do for people who have only been in like their one experience of the world. I don't know. What do you think?
There's stuff that people just don't realize that they're missing. And that is always an issue, always. But I don't know. I mean, class is a great example, because when Cindy and I were first writing the book, Writing the Other, class was not seen as a significant difference. It was not admitted in the U.S. as something that divided people up. Now it is.
What year was this book written?
2005.
Wow. So, okay, 20 years.
Yeah. So 20 years ago. There are other categories that have risen in importance, or totally been discovered. For instance, in the U.S., citizenship, that was never an issue. Huge issue now. The cis trans axis. There was not really any consideration of it. So that and class and citizenship we did not address because they were not ones that were given weight. Those categories were seen as unimportant. Now they're seen as important. In 20 years, the paradigm has shifted.
Well, that's good news. So we have the love letter from the future in 2005 has finally hit a little bit in 2025. So good news. So the love letter we're putting out now maybe will have some impact in the future.
It will. It will.
That's the goal.
So let me ask the question that often gets asked about the issues around cultural appropriation.
Actually, let me talk about this in terms of a model that Diantha Sprouse, a friend of mine, came up with. Diantha was saying that there are 3 ways that people interact with a culture other than the one that they have in their own background. They can interact as a guest, as a tourist, or as like an invader, basically. So the problem lies in people mistaking which of these categories they belong in. An invader, they come into the culture and they say, oh, here, look, I think I like these sword pieces. Let me have these, and I will use this in my my murder mystery that I'm writing. And they just take it and it's theirs. A tourist would say, you know, I would like to use these, how you create these swords in my story. Let me figure out if there's any toll to pay on these. Let me find out if there are limits on how many I would use, and you know, would I be using them inappropriately if I used them in a murder mystery? You know, that kind of thing. Paying attention to what they're using. And then there are guests who have been accepted into the culture. And the problem is that often people who are invaders or tourists think they are guests.
Wow. Well, how would one? I guess one has to put in the 10,000 hours or even 1,000 hours. How would one know?
They would tell you. You would be told. You know, hey, why don't you come over to my house and you know, look at my sword collection, and we can talk about, you know, where I got these from, and you can like try them out and that kind of stuff.
And that would come, how do I say this? Like, so it means you'd have to take a class and then the teacher would say, yes, you understand this culture, or?
Well, you know, I always like to say also that you cannot necessarily get like a degree in someone else's culture, because there are very few schools, say in Aboriginal cooking, for instance. So you don't necessarily have built-in gatekeepers, but you do have people who were raised in that culture, and knowing them personally is actually what I'm thinking of more, rather than taking a class. Taking a class sounds to me more like, you know, the kind of formal preparation that you would undergo if you were working as a tourist in this milieu.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I'm glad I asked. I'm glad you answered.
Do you feel, from your experience with your students, that they are coming to grasp what this means, not just in their own writing, but kind of in a bigger sense of themselves in the world.
Most of them are, and if they're not, then I quickly lose track of them. We're not hanging out, you know.
Right.
But the people who come back for more classes, the people that engage with me or with the other instructors, because we do have other instructors besides me in Tempest, those people, they are on a lovely journey, a journey of discovery, and I think that they keep going. Writing is one of those things that you can keep learning, you know, as long as you're alive. You just can keep getting better at it.
Well, I have a couple questions. One, as far as the content that you see out in the world, and I'm not talking about. I mean, we all have our favorite things that we go to, but then there's like the popular stuff. Have you noticed a trend in like pop, any kind of art, music, writing, movies, screenplays, and books, where there's an improvement, or is it kind of staying flat? Like, what's your observation around a trend?
Well, I am 69 years old, about to be 70, so I have seen some change in this over my lifetime. Uh, I wasn't quite around when, say, Billie Holiday was refused the opportunity to sing on a program because it was sponsored by Ivory Soap, and Ivory Soap didn't want black people as part of the show. So now, right? No, seriously, this really happened. They were like, "Oh, black people, they're dirty, so no, they're not going to be on this program that a soap sponsors." So I have seen. I guess there are gradations of change. There came a time when, like, suddenly, you know, all these kids on the playground would all be playing together, and what? One of them is black? One of them is Chinese looking? What? And they were all, there was no acknowledgement of any cultural difference, but there was something there that you could see visually. There was some difference that was just not even explained. And then I've seen, since then, more things where, like, you know, okay, well, you know, maybe all the kids from Kentucky are hanging out, you know, with other Kentuckians. Maybe there is some cultural stuff going on as well as this physical representation. And now I see people reaching out to each other and asking, what is wrong with this story? Or can you read this? Can you look at this before it gets public release? And someone will say, yeah, well, you know what? That person, they were wearing a hat on their afro. It should have been funny shaped. They should have had what we call hat head.
Right.
So then you can, like, get closer to the things that people actually would not know were wrong.
See, so it's more than a sensitivity read; it's more like an accuracy vibe read.
Oh, sure, yeah. And that those steps are coming closer and closer, faster and faster. So I like that.
You and I were talking in our pregame talk about the mix of thinking in a future way about these kinds of topics, but also thinking in a more traditional sense of the things that I've often called the metal rules. So the golden rule, the silver rule, the platinum rule: do unto others, don't do unto others, and do unto others that which they ask you to do unto you. So it's that sense of mutual respect. Put all three rules together, it's kind of this perfect version of human reciprocity. Remembering these really old traditions, and yet we've forgotten them in our modern era. Having to re-remember them as almost future work you had a really fascinating concept that you brought up that I'd love you to talk about, called Sankofa.
Oh, Sankofa. Yes, thank you. Yes. So Sankofa is a Ghanaian word linked to a particular image. There are these symbols, important symbols in Ghanaian culture, and they're called adinkra, Adinkra, and the Sankofa one is a drawing of a bird, like an ostrich or an emu. It's not a bird in flight, moving forward into the future, but looking back over its shoulder and reaching back with its beak for an egg. Sankofa literally means go back and get it. And the idea is there are treasures in the past that we need to bring forward into the future.
I love that concept because I think that's so crucial to not just the new mythos, but the work you do, which is finding those basic human behaviors that are positive, that are regenerative, that are supportive and respectful, and not forgetting about them in the future that we're moving into. Because certainly I think if we have a crisis today, it's that we have utterly forgotten what it means to be good to each other, kind, compassionate, empathetic. I think that's a fantastic image, and it's really sat with me since you were talking about it, and is so much about the work you're doing as well. So another thing you've mentioned before, and I want to talk about this because the new mythos is very much about having a realization. For me, it was an actual epiphany, sitting next to you, physically next to you. Where for me, it was like someone peeled the top of my brain off and the stuff just started coming through and out. And you had one recently that's forcing you to discover what it might actually mean. And I think these are really wonderful things that happen in our lives.
Oh, you're talking about the 5 petals of thought.
Yes. Can you explain the 5 petals of thought and kind of where you are at this point?
I can try. Basically, I will start by telling you the dream that it came to me in, because then we can talk about what it actually is. So the 5 petals of thought. I was asleep. I was dreaming. I dreamt that I was overhearing some work colleagues complain to each other. One of them was complaining to the other about they were having a hard time with someone that they were working with, maybe that they were working for. That's not clear, but they could not get along with them. Everything that they said was misunderstood. It was just rough sailing. So the person that they complained to said, well, why didn't you use the 5 petals of thought? To which they responded, oh yeah, gosh, how dumb. I should have just used the 5 petals of thought. End scene.
And you're like, what are the 5 petals of thought?
So then in the dream, I'm like flying low. It's like a drone shot over this rolling landscape. There are these fieldstone walls. There's this old house with a fieldstone foundation. I go inside and I learn that it is where the 5 petals of thought were taught. And I also pick up somehow the information that the 5 petals of thought were sometimes called the New Bedford Rose because it was instrumental in the formation of unions among the women working in cotton mills, in spinning mills in New England, in the Northeast. in the early 19th century.
Wait,
Okay.
so the Cotton Row, New Bedford Rows were in your dream, or you knew
This
this?
is still my dream. Third part of the dream coming up.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, this is an elaborate dream. So, first a conversation, then I go see the school. The third part was a bunch of diagrams of what each petal stood for and how they worked together. So I wake up and I'm like, yeah, this is great. Let me find out more about the 5 petals of thought. So I'm Googling and looking in Wikipedia, and there's nothing. There's nothing. This thing does not exist. There is no such thing as the 5 petals of thought, or the 4 petals of thought, or the 5 petals of anything. So then I realized I had to make it work. I had to create it. It had to come from me. So
You sound tired.
I know the feeling, Nisi.
yes, top of brain blown off. So I wrote a few stories about the 5 petals of thought, and got them published. There's the 3rd petal is up at Wired magazine. 4th and most important is up at the Arizona State University. They published a bunch of fiction, and I did one called New Action for a journal called Efflux. And then I wrote about it for Timmy Duchamp did this anthology called Hidden Histories and Missing Links. That was a bunch of fake Wikipedia articles. So I got to write a fake Wikipedia article about it. And I included it in another book, Mardu Fox, the Day and Night books of Mardu Fox. I had her have some encounters with it. But what I really want to do, and what I'm raising money to do now, is write a self-help book called The 5 Petals of Thought, with like exercises and a history and all this stuff that I'm just making up.
That's so fun. That sounds really fun. I'll buy it, because I was thinking about this question for a while. A lot of what we've been talking about during the podcast and a lot of what's on the website and your offerings is either things that people can read or things for other writers. And yes, it's great for people to read, but what if somebody isn't necessarily an aspiring writer or a working writer? Is there a way for those people to access some of these concepts as, connecting to the other, feeling the other, becoming more aware of the other? You understand my question?
Yes, I do. And the 5 petals of thought is really that kind of thing where you're not just thinking about it, you're actually doing it and then learning from what you do.
Okay,
So that's
well,
what that's
the world
about.
definitely needs that, because I imagine that not every single person listening to this podcast is going to want to be a writer. I mean, it'd be nice, but I think some people, like, okay, even let's say a person listening to this podcast may or may not want to be a writer, but would it benefit somebody to take that class on writing the other, even if they don't want to become a writer as a job or a hobby?
Well, they would learn a lot about reading and a lot about stories. Not all of the examples that we use in the book and not all of the examples that we use when we're teaching are books or short stories. Some of them are cartoons, some of them are movies, some of them are plays. So, some of them are games. So there's a wide variety of kinds of stories or formats, I guess you would say, for stories out there, and that's what you're learning to pay attention to when you get into writing the other.
Sure. And like something that PJ and I have spoken about while we were coming up with the idea for this podcast is that as humans, we live our lives around our understanding of stories. So
Yeah. We're pretty much all telling stories about ourselves to ourselves the whole time, right?
All the time, every day. So whether or not you decide to call yourself a writer, your brain is writing its own stories all the time.
Absolutely. Yep.
And so many jobs are about communication, and you may not think of yourself as a writer or a storyteller, but you're still communicating a worldview and opinions of how we interact or don't. And that's what writing other is all about. It's about expanding your concept of what the world is and who are all the people in it.
And that's why I think that first part of the dream was so important, because it was someone having a real life experience and trying to change their story.
How easy do you think it is for people to change their story?
I think that they have to do it in community. And then it becomes easier. And then it becomes a lot easier because you are being influenced by other people's ideas of what the story is, what's going on. And if you can open yourself to that influence, then you have a lot easier time changing your story, because you've seen that there are other stories out there.
That makes a lot of sense. But community can also, like, I've had the experience where you go and you see people who you haven't seen in a long time, and I've changed, but they still see me as the person who they knew before, and they don't, it's hard to, you're almost like screaming into the void, I'm not that person anymore, but they don't want to see it. So the community can really influence you to stay stuck.
Yeah, you don't want to necessarily only go with one kind of community. You want to avail yourself of more than one community and more than one kind of community. I'm from Kalamazoo, Michigan, and when I go back there, my aunt just, does not respect my opinion, doesn't. It thinks that I'm like just some pothead or something. I have, and I'm like 69 years old. Okay, I actually have some life experience. But as far as she's concerned, my story is the same that it was when I was 18.
Right. So when you were an 18-year-old, you smoked a joint, and somehow she's got that you stuck in her head forever.
Exactly. To the point that I offered her a cup of tea and she thought it was full of marijuana.
That's wild.
Wow.
because that was, I wasn't staying stuck in that story, but she sure was.
1970s marijuana. That doesn't sound very good. Dirtweed. Stale dirtweed.
I was recently talking to someone about how our story is so much dependent on not just our sense of our identity, but the fact that we have multiple identities.
Oh.
And, someone said, well, who are you? What do you do? And I was literally stuck because I wasn't sure anymore. The old stories didn't seem right. The new story I'm moving into, and I'm different things to different people.
Yes.
And I think that's also a really interesting aspect of writing the other, because there is a truism that when you are writing people who are not like yourself, there are still bits of you, the writer, that inhabit those characters. They come from somewhere inside yourself. And they can be very different from you in the categories you are filed in by society. But there's got to be some empathetic impulse.
Absolutely, yeah. I do talk about that in the book, Writing the Other, using a short story of mine, The Tawny Bitch, in which, so the protagonist is this mixed race heiress from the Caribbean, and I'm like, I'm not from the Caribbean, I'm not mixed race, I'm not an heiress by any means, and yet I had to find those points of empathy. And for me, they were, she's in love, because I was in love at the time. She's a picky eater, which, yeah, okay, I guilty. And she was really into words and spelling. And yeah, just ask Tempest about that.
It sounds like what you did is find common ground. So
Yes.
it's easy for the brain to go compartmentalize and put people in categories. And what you're saying that you did in that experiment or that exercise, and that what you're perhaps recommending that other people do, is find some common ground, find some bridge to connect with this other, and that's a starting off point to expand.
I would actually, I sometimes try to condense writing the other into like a few sentences. And the best way I've found to do that is to say, okay, there's this spectrum of errors in writing the other. You can go one way or the other, and they're both wrong. One way is everything about this person who is different than me is like strange and weird and exotic, and I just like, I could never understand them. The other end of that scale is, well, actually, they're just like me. And the truth is a little more nuanced than that. It goes back and forth. There's a little bit that is just like me. There's a little bit that is like totally bizarre from my viewpoint. So that to me is the essence of writing the other, that you do acknowledge the difference, and you also acknowledge the similarities.
It's funny how the right answer is almost always the middle way.
Isn't it?
Isn't that funny?
What you're saying reminds me of that. It's a quote, I think, or something I've heard, is like, you're a mixture of the people who you spend the most time with.
Oh, I can see that. There's something, okay, I'm going to back up a little bit. Of the classes that we teach, my favorite is the dialect and dialogue class. And there's a phenomenon that is most observable with dialogue, and that is code switching. So I would say, yes, you are, in a way, reflecting back the people that you see, and especially in this instance, you're reflecting back the way that they talk. But you don't always have to do that. Sometimes you want to be a little more obscure, so you can say things that no one is going to understand, because the people that understand that are over there, and you are over here with these people. So there's code switching with words, and I believe, Laura, you may be right that there's code switching with other things. I'm sure there's code switching with mannerisms, with clothing, and all of that.
Sure. I mean, I find myself often in just kind of uptight corporate business vibes, and I'm so not that. And so, like, for me, my dream would be of a world of freaks, where people could just sit on the floor and not have a stick up their ass. And I find myself not in those groups all the time. And
yeah,
I guess you would call it, I never considered that I code switch, but apparently I do.
Oh, I bet you do.
Yeah.
Most people do. It's a very human thing.
We're such social creatures, and so want to be accepted into whatever group we're in at the moment. I certainly know I do it.
I think it's also for better communication.
Yes, exactly.
We're mirroring back to people how they sound to us, and we're doing it unconsciously, but it does improve communication.
And again, it gets back to the sense of what is our identity, and there's no way that we have one. We truly do contain multitudes.
We do. We do.
Yeah.
So the five petals is a translation of this writing the other into more of a understanding the other for everybody, including writers.
I'm not sure that that's all that it is, actually. It seems to me to be just a way of dealing with the entire world, not just with people.
Well, we're going to have you on the show again when the book is written.
Okay. Twist my arm.
Yeah.
There is something that I wanted to say about the idea that the new mythos needs to spring from the diversity that is our strength. And we're not just repurposing Greek myths. We're not just repurposing Chinese myths or European myths. We're drawing on and coming into contact with myths from everywhere, current myths, and maybe a little bit repurposing them, but they're not just from one source. I guess that's what I want to say. And
maybe some brand new ones that have taken everything from all these other cultures and added to what's going on now, so that literally they are new.
I also think that I am reading now and about to talk with the author of a book called Hole in the Sky, and it's an alien first contact story that takes place on a Cherokee reservation. So the cultural experience in the background that is part of that Cherokee reservation can give rise to new myths just without being enmeshed in another myth. Doesn't have to be mixed. It's just a new source for a new myth.
Exactly, wholly original new myths. That's what we're about.
I think it's a combination of all of it. I mean, I think you're going to find that some of the myths are repurposed. Some of the myths are wholly new from new experiences we're having. As I keep telling folks, storytelling is how we as humans grapple with problem solving. And they can be real problems, or they can be problems we imagine or problems we know exist in the world. But as those problems change, and they are changing, the stories we tell change as well. And how we put ourselves as human beings into those stories, whether we're protagonists or antagonists or anti-heroes, or however we choose to exist as characters in those stories, are how we're going to choose to deal with these new problems. And I do believe that it is this fascinating combination, as it has been throughout human history, of new problems. We had new problems in the, quote, Enlightenment, or the age of scientific, industrial, and political revolutions. So we came up with a whole new way to tell stories that hadn't existed before. But we didn't throw out some of the old stories. We kind of, in a sedimentary way, added on top of them. Or shifted them, or turned it around and put the point of view from the other side of the story. And then other times we just came up with whole new ways of being and interpreting the problem and how we would solve it. So I think there's room for everything. It doesn't have to be a single way forward. And I would love to read that book.
It's a very different lens.
Nisi, thank you so much. I'm so thrilled. You don't know. I feel like this interview's kind of brought my own little personal journey around in a circle, because you were there when I,
at the
went someplace
inception.
else. Yeah, at the inception.
Yeah, and it's like the whole idea of inclusivity, and you're included here with us right now.
So thank you, everyone.
And audience, you're included with us right now, too.
Yes, you are, audience. So please, thank you for joining. Please like and subscribe and join us again for Love Letters to the Future. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.